All right, I'm going to show you how you can fill in the unit circle pretty easily just by memorizing a couple of simple patterns. I hope this is helpful. Please, rewatch it a few times if you're not seeing the patterns. But I think this can really help you generate the unit circle on those calculus type assessments, especially the AP exam, when you're going to really need to know specific values of sine and cosine. Okay, to start off with, let's just do the radian measures. I'm not going to even bother with the degrees. You should be able to figure out the degrees on your own because, basically go from 0 to 360. But let's just talk about radian measures. And the first thing that we should mark about radian measures is that, obviously this is 0, and then when you go all the way around, it's 2 pi. Okay, that's just something you should have memorized. And then half of 2 pi, obviously, is just 1 pi. And what's half of 1 pi? Well, it would be pi halves. And then what's right in between pi and 2 pi halves? Well, we would call that 3 pi halves, right? 3 pi halves. Okay, so let's just kind of keep doing that basic math, right? So what's half of a pi? Well, that's a fourth of a pi. So right here, I'm going to put pi fourths. Right in between pi halves and pi, that would be pi, what is that, 3 pi fourths? And you keep going with that basic idea for the ones that are in the half. We'll do these little ones later in just a second. But the easy thing to do here is actually to just count by fourths. So I'm going to highlight all these middle ones for us. And all we're going to do is we're going to just count by pi fourths, and I'll show you. It'll just work. You just have to know how to reduce. So if we count it by pi fourths, so this is 1 pi fourths. This would be 2 pi fourths. Well, 2 pi fourths reduces down to pi halves, okay? And then this would be 3 pi fourths, 4 pi fourths. Well, 4 divided by 4 is just 1, so that's just pi. And then here we would have 5 pi fourths, 6 pi fourths, but again, 6 pi fourths, if you think about it, 6 pi fourths reduces down to 3 pi halves. And then here we would have 7 pi fourths. I'm kind of using that line there as my fraction bar. And then finally, you get back to the end here, and you have 8 pi fourths. Well, 8 divided by 4 is 2, so it's just 2 pi. All right, so my point is on these yellow ones, all we had to do is count by pi fourths. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. On these other ones, we're going to count by pi sixes. So the very first one is going to be pi 6. And I'm just going to go through and count by pi sixes on all these other ones. And on these ones, I'm only going to do these lines, but I am still going to do the big corners. So on all of these, I'm going to count by pi 6 now. I was kind of hoping that it would show up green. It kind of does on the overlap because we do the corners. We count those twice. Okay, so let's just think about that now. So the first one obviously is pi 6. Then this would be 2 pi 6. But right away, we should see something weird there, right? Because if I was to write 2 pi 6, that could be reduced. So I wouldn't write 2 pi 6. I'd write pi third. And then I would have 3 pi 6. But again, 3 pi 6 reduces, if you think about that, right? There's going to be a lot of reducing here, right? 3 pi 6 is the same thing as 2 pi fourths. It's the same thing as pi halves. And then we have 4 pi 6, but 4 pi 6 reduces to 2 pi thirds. And then we have 5 pi 6. That does not reduce, so we can just write 5 pi 6. And then here we'd have 6 pi 6. Well, 6 and 6 cancel out. And then here we'd have 7 pi 6. And then here we'd have 8 pi 6, but obviously 8 pi 6 reduces. Think about that, right? So you got 8 pi 6. You could take a 2 out of each of those, and that would be 4 pi third. And then here you would have, if this is 8 pi 6, this would be 9 pi 6. But again, we already know that this is going to reduce to 3 pi halves. Next up is 10 pi 6. But 10 pi 6, we could take a 2 out of both of those and make that 5 pi thirds. And then next up, or last one, well, second last one is 11 pi 6. And then finally, the last one would be 12 pi 6, but again, 12 divided by 6 is just 2, so you're back down to 2 pi. Okay, that's a quick, easy way to remember how to mark all these in. We just count by pi 6 for the odd ones, and we count by pi fourths for the middle ones, and we count both of them at the corners. So 1 6, 2 6, 3 6, 4 6, 5 6, 6 6, 7 6, 8 6, 9 6, 10 6, 11 6, 12 6. Boom. Fourths. 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths, 4 fourths, 5 fourths, 6 fourths, 7 fourths, 8 fourths. That's it. If you can count, you can fill these in. Now that's just the radian part, but that's actually, I think, the part that students struggle with the most. This other part is filling in the measurements. And this couldn't be easier. Let me erase some of these other drawings that I have here. And I'll do all these measurements in blue so you can kind of see it. What I like to do first is just plot all of these points, like the corner points. So what do I mean by that? Let's highlight real quick. I just mean these corners. Let's just plot those corners. What would those points be? They should be pretty easy to do. Obviously, this would be 1, 0. Up here, this would be 0, 1. This would be negative 1, 0. And this would be 0, negative 1. Easy peasy. Now, all we have to do is count to 3. So check it out. I'm going to do this one on the right first, because if you look on the right, as I go around the circle, I'm going to go from 0 to 1. So that tells me I'm counting up. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, up. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. And the next one, I'm going to count down because I'm going from 1 to 0. So I'm going to go 3, 2, 1. Now here's the thing that you need to do. All these need to have a 2 on the bottom. You just got to remember they always have a 2 on the bottom. And they all are underneath the square root. But I want you to think about something. What's the square root of 1? Isn't it just 1 again? So you don't really need that square root sign there. So put the square roots over the 2's and over the 3's, but you don't really need to put over the 1. You can. It just doesn't make a difference because the square root of 1 is just 1. All right. Boom, we just found all their angle measures. We can do the same thing on every single one of these corners. The only difference is, obviously, sometimes the values are negative depending on what quadrant they're in. But that should be easy because over in this quadrant, we know that it goes negative, positive. In this quadrant, we know it goes negative, negative. And in this quadrant, we know it goes positive, negative. And obviously, in this quadrant, it's positive, positive. So if we know those, that's pretty easy. So let's just do our counting. Once again, starting from the left number, I'm going to go from 0 to, I know it's negative 1. We'll put in the negative later. But from 0 to 1, I'm going to count up. So I'm just going to do 1. Oops, I said I was going to do blue. 1, 2, 3. That means the other one is 3, 2, 1, all over 2. And square roots on the top. Boom. Now, which ones are negative? Well, remember, according to this, the left ones are negative. So that's a negative, that's a negative, that's a negative. Boom. All right, let's do the bottom. Everything's going to be negative here, so that's not tricky. Let's go ahead and fill in our numbers. On the left, it's a 1. On the left hand here, it's a 0, so I'm going to count down on the left. So that's going to be 3, 2, 1. That means this way is 1, 2, 3. Square root over 2, over 2, square root over 2, square root over 2. Don't need the square root over 2, and they're all negative, 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 negative. Boom. All right, last quadrant over here. Let's start on the left. I'm going to go from 0 to 1, so I'm going to count up. So 1, 2, 3. The other way would be the opposite. 3, 2, 1. Oh, that's a 3. Everything's over 2. And square roots on the top. And on this one, the right side is negative. So negative, negative, negative. Boom. I just filled out the whole unit circle. You could do the degrees. That shouldn't be too hard. I mean, if you want to stick around, I'll do the degrees real quick. That should be pretty simple. Let's see. I'll do those in red. Again, you start with 0. You end with 360. That means half of 360 is 180. Half of 80 is 90. Halfway between 280 and 360 is 270. So you got your basic ones. Really, if you're counting by pi fourths on these middle ones, it's just like counting by 45. So you could kind of see that. That's going to go 45, 90. 90 plus 45 is 135. 135 plus 45 is 180. 180 plus 145, or plus 45 is 225. 225 plus 45 is 270. 270 plus 45 is 315. And we're back around. Now we're going to count by 30s. So that's 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, 330, and 360. Obviously, the degrees, pretty easy to do. All right, so that's explaining how to do unit circle. Hopefully you guys find that helpful. I'll see you guys in the next video.